Welcome back, creatives. Happy New Year. Okay, let me start with something we don't often talk about in product building. You don't actually know what you're building when you start. You might think you do. You've done the research, written the document, mapped the flows, held the meetings. But the truth is, clarity doesn't come at the beginning. It shows up after people have touched the product. And here's why that matters. Because when you're in the planning phase, you're working with assumptions. You're imagining how users will behave, what they'll need, what will make sense to them. But these assumptions aren't fact. They're educated guesses at best. And now you might even have statistics and research to back that up. But here's the thing. This is where Agile comes in. Agile isn't a fancy methodology or tech buzzword. It's basically a humble admission that we don't know everything yet. It's a way of building that expects to be wrong and builds that expectation right into the process. When teams begin to build, test, and ship small pieces of a product, something interesting happens. Reality shows up. Users start to click things you didn't expect. They ignore features you thought were important. They struggle with the things that looked perfectly fine on your whiteboard. And suddenly, the gaps appear. Not because the team is bad, not because the idea was weak, but because no amount of planning can replace real usage. Because no amount of planning can stimulate human behavior. You can't really predict how someone will actually use your product until they are using it. You can't know what confuses them until they tell you, or worse, until they silently leave. Agile creates space for that reality. Instead of saying, we've already decided, let's push through, Agile says, okay, we've learned something, let's adjust. That's one of its biggest advantage. You're not looked into pretending your first idea was perfect. You're allowed to respond, to learn, to evolve. You're allowed to say, that didn't work out the way we thought it would, without derailing the entire project. Because here's the thing, users don't validate your assumptions, they expose them. And a rigid process takes that personally. It treats change like failure. Agile doesn't. It expects change, it expects feedback, it expects that the product you imagined will not be the product people actually use. And instead of resisting that, it uses it. Another advantage people don't talk about enough is what Agile does to teams. It makes honesty safer. Think about it. In a traditional waterfall system, if something isn't working, admitting feels risky. You've already committed to a plan, you've already told stakeholders what's coming. Changing course feels like you messed up. But in Agile, change is expected. You can say, this isn't working, without it sounding like failure. You can fix gaps that appear instead of discovering them months after launch, when it's expensive and embarrassing. Agile doesn't stop mistakes from happening. It just stops mistakes from becoming permanent. It gives you permission to be wrong early when it still feels cheap and easy to fix. And maybe the most important part, Agile keeps you close to your users. Not the ideal user in your pitch deck. No, the real user, the one struggling, adapting, and sometimes completely misusing your product. The one who clicks the wrong buttons, skips the onboarding process, and then emails support asking why it's not working. That user. The messy, unpredictable, real one. That is the user that teaches you what your product actually needs to be. Because in the end, products aren't built in planning rooms. They're shaped in real life by real people doing things, not by your assumptions about what they'll do. So if there's one thing to remember, it's this. Agile isn't about moving fast. It's about staying honest with your product, your users, your team, and yourself. And sometimes the best team can say, let's test it and see what the reality has to say. But something you need to remember, again, is that users don't validate your assumptions. They expose them. If you enjoyed this episode, kindly share and leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.